The cavern erupted in chaos as the shadow creature clawed its way from the pit, its form a writhing mass of darkness and burning eyes. The cultists, caught in the throes of their own ritual, were the first to fall, torn apart or consumed by the very power they had summoned. The legionnaires formed a defensive line, bolt guns roaring as they fired into the encroaching gloom. Each round that struck the creature's shifting body sent ripples through the darkness, but the wounds closed as quickly as they appeared. Vera pressed forward, her faith a beacon against the encroaching void. "Ro, can you disrupt the anchor glyphs?" she called, voice steady despite the psychic storm battering her mind. Muggos Ro, shielded by Lucan and two legionnaires, interfaced with a cluster of ritual devices near the pit's edge. The glyphs are woven into the cavern structure. Disruption will require a localized overload. "I will need cover." Lucan led his squad in a disciplined advance, power sword blazing as he hacked through the last of the cultists. "Hold the line. Protect the Muggos." The cult leader, his eyes blazing with warp fire, stood at the brink of the pit, arms raised in defiance. "You cannot stop the convergence. The gate will open, and the Imperium will drown in shadow." Vera faced him, her bolt pistol steady. "Your faith in the void is misplaced. The Emperor's light endures." She fired, the shot punching through the leader's chest. He staggered, blood and shadow pouring from the wound, but he only laughed, a sound that echoed with 1,000 voices. The shadow creature surged, tendrils lashing out. One legionnaire was caught, dragged screaming into the pit. The others held firm, their hymns rising above the cacophony. Rose mechadendrites sparked as he overloaded the glyphs. "Now, Inquisitor, the resonance is destabilizing." Vera drew upon every ounce of will, reciting the Emperor's benediction as she advanced to the pit's edge. The psychic pressure threatened to crush her, but her faith blazed like a star. She hurled a sanctified charge into the heart of the glyph's circle that a blinding flash filled the cavern. The glyphs shattered, the pit convulsed, and the shadow creature shrieked as it was dragged back into the abyss. The cult leader's body collapsed, the laughter fading into silence. The cavern was still. The only sound was the labored breathing of the survivors. Lucan knelt beside a fallen legionnaire, his face grim. "We lost too many, but the gate is closed." Ro approached Vera, the altar fragment clutched in his mechanical grip. The convergence was halted, but the resonance persists. There are more nodes, more cults. The war is not over. Vera holstered her pistol, exhaustion and resolve mingling in her eyes. "Then we fight on. The Emperor's enemies will find no refuge, not in shadow, nor in the depths of the earth." As they ascended from Sable Deep, the miners watched in awe and fear, uncertain whether they had been saved or merely spared for another day. Above, the battered world of Vespera turned slowly beneath a sky still choked with dust. But for now, the darkness had been driven back. The ascent from the depths of Sable Deep was slow and somber. The miners gathered at the surface, their faces etched with exhaustion and disbelief. They had witnessed horrors beyond the understanding of most, and yet the shadow that had gripped their world was pushed back, if only for now. Vera stood at the edge of the landing pad, her cloak still stained with the grime of the cavern. Around her, the legionnaires tended to the wounded and secured the site. Muggos Ro hovered nearby, his mechanical limbs delicately handling the altar fragment recovered from the ritual's site. Casualties. The legionnaires had suffered heavy losses, many good men and women lost to the cult's fanaticism and the shadow creature's wrath that miners fear. The local population was shaken, their faith in the guilds and their own safety deeply shaken by the cult's infiltration morale. Despite the victory, a palpable tension lingered. The war was far from over, and the convergence's shadow loomed larger with each passing day. Ro's analysis of the altar fragment uncovered encrypted data traces embedded within the Voidstone's matrix. The fragment contained coordinates, new star charts pointing to an ancient, forgotten world known as Celum Obscurus, ritual sequences, references to a final ascendance, a ritual that could amplify the Convergence's power exponentially. Cult hierarchy. Mentions of a shadow council, leaders coordinating the cult's efforts across multiple worlds. Vera's expression hardened as she absorbed the information. The cult is no longer a scattered threat. It is an organized force with a plan that spans the stars. Strategic decisions. Vera convened a council with Lucan and Ro to plan their next move. Coelum Obscurus was remote and dangerous, but it was the next critical node. Resources. Archmagos Helion had pledged additional mechanist support, and the High Conclave was dispatching reinforcements to bolster the Legionnaires. Warnings. Vera sent a coded transmission to Terra, urging vigilance and requesting aid in uncovering the cult's origins and ultimate goals as the crew prepared to depart Vespera. The weight of the war ahead settled heavily on their shoulders. The Imperium's light had driven back the darkness once more, but the true battle, the war for the soul of the galaxy, was only just beginning. The journey to Coelum Obscurus was fraught with tension. The ship's Geller fields groaned under the strain of the warp, and even the most seasoned legionnaires kept their weapons close at hand. Vera spent the voyage poring over the encrypted data Ro had extracted from the Voidstone fragment, searching for any clue that might give them an edge. Coelum Obscurus emerged from the void as a world shrouded in perpetual twilight, its atmosphere thick with swirling clouds and veils of dust. Ruined spires and ancient fortresses dotted the landscape, remnants of a forgotten age. The planet's surface was a patchwork of desolate plains and labyrinthine canyons, each one a potential hiding place for the cult's Shadow Council. Lucan stood beside Vera as the shuttle descended, his expression grim. If the cult's leaders are here, they'll be well defended. Vera nodded. We must move quickly. The final ascendance ritual cannot be allowed to begin. The team landed at the edge of a ruined city, its streets choked with ash and silence. Ro's sensors detected faint energy signatures emanating from the heart of the ruins, a signal matching the Voidstone's resonance. Stealth approach. Legionnaires advanced through the rubble, avoiding patrols of warped cultists and automated sentries left over from a long-dead civilization. Hidden chambers. Beneath a collapsed cathedral, they uncovered a network of tunnels leading to a subterranean sanctum. The walls pulsed with glyphs, and the air was thick with the scent of incense and corruption. To the sanctum's heart, the Shadow Council convened. A circle of robed figures, each masked and surrounded by a nimbus of psychic power. In the center, a massive Voidstone altar throbbed with dark energy, its surface etched with the ritual sequences for the final ascendance. Vera stepped forward, her presence announced by the snap of her cloak and the cold gleam of her bolt pistol. By the Emperor's will, your heresy ends here, she declared, her voice echoing in the chamber. The council's leader, a figure swathed in shadow, replied in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. You are too late, Inquisitor. The convergence is upon us. The gate will open, and the galaxy will be remade. Battle erupts. Legionnaires and mechanists surged into the chamber, bolters roaring. The Council unleashed psychic storms, warping reality and hurling Vera's forces back. Ro's countermeasures. Muggos Ro deployed disruption fields, destabilizing the Voidstone's resonance and weakening the Council's defenses. Lucan's charge. Lucan led a wedge of legionnaires into the heart of the fray, his power sword blazing as he cut down cultists and shattered glyphs as the ritual neared completion. Vera locked eyes with the Council's leader. Drawing upon the Emperor's benediction, she projected a wave of psychic light, disrupting the ritual's pattern. The Voidstone altar cracked, releasing a torrent of energy that consumed several Council members. The surviving cultists faltered, their unity shattered. Lucan pressed the attack, and Ro overloaded the sanctum's machinery, causing the chamber to collapse in on itself. The Shadow Council was broken. The final ascendance ritual left incomplete. As the survivors regrouped amid the ruins, Ro presented Vera with a final discovery, a fragment of the Council's archives containing references to a hidden master, an entity known only as the Eclipse guiding the cult from the shadows. Vera's resolve hardened. We have cut off the head, but the true mind remains. The war is not yet won. As the fires of Coelum Obscurus faded behind them, Vera and her companions prepared for the next stage of their crusade, knowing that, somewhere in the darkness, the eclipse watched and waited. The victory on Coelum Obscurus was brief and bitter. While the Shadow Council had been broken and the final Ascendant's ritual left in ruins, Vera's mind never left the final clue, the name Eclipse. The cult's true master had eluded them, and the threat lingered like a shadow at the edge of every thought. Back aboard their ship, Vera, Lucan, and Muggos pored over the recovered fragment of the Council's archives. The data was heavily encrypted, but Rose mechadendrites worked tirelessly, sifting through layers of code and psychic residue. The name Eclipse appeared again and again, always linked to ancient coordinates, forbidden rituals, and references to a lost archive on a dead world. Vera transmitted her findings to the High Conclave. Their response was swift and grave. Reinforcements would be dispatched, but the Inquisition's resources were stretched thin across 1,000 crises. Vera was authorized to pursue the Eclipse by any means necessary, and to invoke Exterminatus if the threat could not be contained. Rose analysis revealed a pattern in the cult's movements, a trail of worlds, each one a stepping stone in a grand design. The next clue pointed to the edge of Imperial space, to a system lost in the warp for centuries, the Veil of Night. Lucan drilled the Legionnaires, their numbers bolstered by Mechanus Scitarii and Sisters of the Sacred Flame who had sworn themselves to Vera's cause. Supplies were loaded, prayers were spoken, and the ship's Geller fields were blessed by every priest aboard. Vera stood on the bridge as the ship prepared to jump. She gazed into the void, her resolve unbroken. We hunt the Eclipse. We end this, whatever the cost. As the warp engines flared and the stars stretched into infinity, the hunt for the cult's hidden master began. The journey to the Veil of Night was unlike any the crew had faced. The warp itself seemed to resist their passage, and the Geller fields flickered with unnatural strain. Dreams were haunted by glimpses of a masked figure, always just out of reach, always watching. The ship emerged into real space at the edge of a dying star system. The Veil of Night was a graveyard of shattered planets and drifting hulks, the remnants of a forgotten war. The only signal was a faint, repeating pulse, coordinates embedded in the cult's archives. Lucan stood at Vera's side, his legionnaires tense and alert. There's nothing here but ghosts. Muggos Rose scanned the debris field, his sensors straining. There's a structure amid the ruins, artificial, ancient, shielded from most scans. That is where the signal leads. A battered shuttle ferried the strike team through the asteroid field. They landed on the surface of a fractured moon, where a cyclopean vault door stood half-buried in regolith. Ro deciphered the runes and bypassed the wards, revealing a descent into darkness. Inside, the Black Archive waited, a labyrinth of data vaults, shrines, and ossuaries. The walls were lined with the bones of forgotten martyrs and the records of forbidden knowledge. The air was thick with psychic echoes, each step stirring memories best left undisturbed. As the team advanced, they encountered the first defenders, wraith-like servitors corrupted by the warp, and cultists who had given their bodies to Shadow. The fighting was brutal and swift. The Legionnaires disciplined the only shield against madness, the Archive's heart. They found a chamber dominated by a great obsidian mirror. Rose's sensors screamed with warning as the surface rippled, revealing the image of the Eclipse, a figure robed in void black, their face hidden behind a mask of shifting stars. The Eclipse spoke, their voice a chorus of many. You have come far, Inquisitor, but you do not understand. The gate is not a weapon, it is a promise. The Imperium's age is ending, and only the darkness will endure. The mirror shattered, releasing a surge of psychic force that hurled the team back. In the wreckage, Vera found a final set of coordinates, one last world, where the cult would gather for the true ascendants. They retreated to the surface. The Veil of Night seemed to close behind them, the stars dimming, as if in mourning. Vera's jaw was set. This ends at the source. Prepare for war. The final coordinates pointed to a nameless world hidden deep within a nebula, its existence erased from Imperial records. As Vera's ship approached, the nebula's tendrils curled around the hull, blotting out the stars and swallowing all light. Even the most seasoned crew felt unease, the air thick with anticipation and dread. The planet below was a wasteland of blackened stone and rivers of ash. In the distance, a fortress rose from the desolation, an impossible structure of obsidian spires and shifting geometry, built to defy reason and reality. Warp storms circled the sky, and the very ground seemed to pulse with unnatural energy. Lucan assembled the strike force, legionnaires, Skitarii, and Sisters of the Sacred Flame, each prepared for the final battle. Muggos deployed sensor drones, mapping the fortress's defenses. The cult's power is strongest at the central spire. That is where the ritual will reach its climax, and where the eclipse awaits. The assault was relentless. Cultists, twisted beyond recognition by the warp, hurled themselves at the attackers. Demonic entities flickered in and out of existence, their shrieks echoing across the battlefield. The fortress's defenses warped reality, forcing the strike force to fight through shifting corridors and impossible halls. Vera led from the front, her faith a beacon in the storm. Every step forward was a battle against despair, but her will never wavered to the heart of the fortress. In a chamber of black glass and swirling void, the eclipse awaited. The cult's master sat upon a throne woven from the bones of saints and traitors alike, the mask of shifting stars hiding their true face. The eclipse rose, their voice a storm. You have come to witness the end, Inquisitor. The gate will open, and the Imperium will fall, not to fire, but to oblivion. Vera challenged. You are nothing but a shadow, hiding from the Emperor's light. Your lies end here. The chamber erupted in psychic fury. The eclipse unleashed the full power of the warp, twisting reality and summoning horrors from the darkness. Legionnaires and sisters fell, but Vera pressed on, shielded by her faith and the prayers of her allies. Muggos overloaded the fortress's wards, destabilizing the ritual. Lucan led a desperate charge, his power sword clashing against the eclipse's own blade of living shadow. In the end, it was Vera's unwavering conviction that broke the eclipse's power. She drove her sanctified blade through the cult leader's heart, shattering the mask and revealing a face both human and monstrous, marked by centuries of corruption and pain. With the eclipse's death, the ritual collapsed. The fortress crumbled, the warp storms receded, and the gate that had threatened to consume the sector flickered and died. Vera stood in the ruins, surrounded by the battered survivors. The war was won, but at a terrible cost. The death of the eclipse sent a psychic shockwave rippling across the planet. The fortress trembled, its impossible architecture unraveling as the warp energies sustaining it began to collapse. Outside, the battlefield was chaos, cultists fleeing in terror, demonic entities dissolving into shrieks and smoke, and the Imperium's forces pressing the advantage. Lucan rallied the remaining legionnaires and sisters of the Sacred Flame, forming a defensive ring around Vera and Muggos as they fought their way back through the crumbling corridors. The cultists, leaderless and maddened by the loss of their master, surged in a final, desperate assault. Muggos worked furiously to stabilize the fortress's collapsing structure, using his knowledge of the Voidstone resonance to buy precious minutes. Vera led the survivors, her faith unbroken even as the walls around them twisted and reality itself seemed to rebel. As the fortress's spires toppled and the ground split open, the strike force reached the landing zone. The shuttle engines roared to life, and the battered survivors boarded under fire, leaving behind a world dissolving into the warp. From orbit, Vera watched as the fortress imploded, a vortex of shadow and light spiraling into nothingness. The gate was gone. The convergence was broken. Casualties were high. Many legionnaires and sisters had given their lives to see the ritual undone. The survivors were changed, haunted by what they had seen and endured. The cult was shattered, its network in ruins, but Vera knew that echoes of its corruption would linger for generations. Back aboard the ship, Vera led a final prayer for the fallen. The Inquisition's victory was total, but it had come at a terrible cost. The Imperium was safe, for now, but the scars of this war would run deep. As the ship left the nebula and the stars returned, Vera looked to her companions. Lucan, Ro, Mirabelle, and the battered survivors. They had faced the darkness and endured. The Emperor's light had prevailed, but Vera knew, as all Inquisitors must, that vigilance was the price of survival. Shadows would rise again, and when they did, she would be ready. The silence that followed the destruction of the hidden world was heavy, a silence filled with mourning, exhaustion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. The survivors gathered in the ship's chapel, the air thick with incense and the soft glow of votive candles. Names of the fallen were read aloud, each one a reminder of the price paid to keep the gate closed. Vera removed her battered rosette and placed it upon the altar, bowing her head as Lucan recited the litany of remembrance. The Sisters of the Sacred Flame sang a hymn for their lost, their voices echoing through the steel corridors. Mugos Ro, ever pragmatic, recorded the names of the dead in the ship's data vault, ensuring their sacrifice would never be forgotten. In her private quarters, Vera reviewed the final fragments of data recovered from the Eclipse's sanctum. Among the shattered archives, she found a confession. The Eclipse had once been an inquisitor, seduced by the promise of forbidden knowledge and the power to shape fate itself at a warning. The cult's roots stretched deep, and others might rise to take the Eclipse's place if vigilance faltered at a vision. A single line, scrawled in blood and shadow. The Emperor endures, but so too does the night. Lucan found Vera staring into the void through the observation port. We won, but at what cost? He asked quietly. Vera's reply was steady. We paid the price willingly. That is what it means to serve the Emperor. But we must not let victory breed complacency. The darkness is patient. Mugos Ro entered, holding a data slate. I have isolated a signal, a distress call from a distant sector. The pattern is familiar. Vera's eyes narrowed, resolve hardening once more. Then our work is not done. The Imperium must be defended, no matter the cost. For every shadow we banish, another may rise. In the chapel, Vera and her companions knelt together, renewing their vows before the Emperor's light. They would carry the memory of the fallen with them, turning grief into strength, vigilance, and faith. As the ship set a new course, the stars ahead seemed brighter, each one a promise that, so long as there were those willing to stand against the darkness, hope would never truly die. The days after the siege passed in a blur of ritual, repair, and quiet reflection. The ship's corridors were subdued, the usual clamor replaced by the soft tread of boots and the low murmur of prayers. Vera walked the decks, offering words of comfort to those who had lost friends and comrades. The wounds of the campaign ran deep, and not all were visible. Lucan spent long hours in the training halls, drilling the legionnaires, those who remained, until exhaustion overtook them. He knew that discipline was a salve as much as it was a shield. Mugos Ro, tireless as ever, cataloged the recovered data and began the slow process of tracing the cult's lingering echoes through the Imperium's tangled networks. The Sisters of the Sacred Flame tended the wounded and led the rites for the dead, their hymns a constant reminder that faith could endure even the blackest night. Vera found herself drawn to solitude, standing often before the ship's viewport, watching the stars slip by. She thought of the eclipse, of the broken mask and the last haunted eyes. The line between savior and heretic was thin. She had seen it, felt it, and knew that vigilance was not only a duty, but a burden. When the distress call arrived, a coded plea from a distant world, the pattern unmistakable, Vera felt no surprise. The war was never truly over. She gathered Lucan, Ro, and the sisters, her voice steady as she spoke. We have honored the fallen. Now we answer the living. The Emperor's light is not a flame to be guarded, but a torch to be carried forward. We go, as we always have, into the dark. No one questioned. They prepared in silence, each drawing strength from the memory of sacrifice and the certainty of purpose. As the ship changed course and the stars shifted, Vera felt the familiar weight settle on her shoulders. Heavy, but never crushing, the ship sailed onward, leaving behind the haunted nebula and the ruins of the hidden world. In the aftermath, Vera called her closest allies, Lucan, Ro, and Canoness Mirabelle, to the Strategium. The chamber was quiet, lit only by the flicker of hololithic stars and the slow pulse of the ship's engines. They reviewed the scars left by the campaign. The Legionnaires' depleted ranks, the Sisters' empty places in the choir, the lingering psychic echoes that Ro's instruments still detected in the ship's lower decks. Each loss was a name, a memory, a promise to do better. Vera stood at the center of the table, her rosette gleaming in the dim light. We have driven back the shadow, but it is never truly gone. The cult's network is broken, but the Imperium's wounds are deep. We will not let their sacrifice be in vain. Lucan nodded, his voice steady. The Legionnaires will rebuild. Those who fell will be remembered in every oath we take. Mirabelle's eyes were fierce. The Sisters will carry the flame to every world that needs it. Faith is our weapon and our shield. Ro's mechanical voice was softer than usual. The data we have gathered will strengthen the Imperium's defenses. But vigilance must be eternal. The next threat will come, as it always does. Vera placed her hand on the table, palm open. One by one, the others did the same, a silent pact renewed. In that moment, their unity was stronger than any fortress, their resolve brighter than any star. As the ship set a new course, Vera looked out at the void. She knew her work would never truly end, but she also knew that as long as there were those willing to stand the watch, the Emperor's light would never fade. The darkness would come again, and so would they. With the eclipse defeated and the convergence halted, the Inquisitor Vera's ship charted a new course toward a distant, flickering distress signal emanating from the far reaches of Imperial space. The signal was faint but unmistakable, a call for aid from a world long abandoned and erased from most records, yet now stirring with ominous warp activity. As the ship slipped through the warp, Vera stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the swirling stars beyond the viewport. Beside her, Captain Lucan readied the Legionnaires, their armor gleaming under the dim lights, weapons primed for battle. Mugos Ro's servo skull hovered nearby, analyzing the incoming data streams with mechanical precision. Preliminary scans indicate an ancient fortress world, Ro reported, its surface scarred by centuries of war and neglect, but recent energy signatures suggest renewed cultist activity, likely a nexus for heretical rites. Canoness Mirabelle's voice was calm but resolute. A forgotten world, but not forgotten by the enemies of the Emperor. We must act swiftly before the darkness takes root anew. Vera's gaze hardened. Prepare the strike force. We will bring the Emperor's judgment to this forsaken place. The war against the shadows is unending, but so is our resolve. As the ship accelerated toward the unknown, the crew steeled themselves for the trials ahead. The beacon of hope was faint, but it burned, and they would follow it into the heart of darkness. The ship broke from the warp above the ancient fortress world, its battered surface illuminated by the cold light of a dying sun. The planet's atmosphere was thick with dust and static, the scars of forgotten wars visible even from orbit. The distress beacon pulsed weakly from a ruined citadel at the edge of a vast, desolate plain. Vera assembled her team in the drop bay. Legionnaires checked their weapons. Sisters of the Sacred Flame recited prayers of protection. Mugos Ro calibrated his auspex, preparing for whatever technological horrors might await. We descend together, Vera commanded. No one strays from the formation. We do not know what dwells in these ruins, or what has been awakened. The shuttle's engines roared as it plunged through the turbulent skies. Lightning danced across the clouds, illuminating the shattered spires and broken walls below. The landing zone was a blasted courtyard, littered with the bones of ancient defenders and the rusted hulks of war machines. As the ramp dropped, the strike force advanced, weapons raised. The air was heavy with the scent of ozone and decay. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic pulse of the distress beacon, echoing through the empty halls. Muggos rose, auspex pinged. Residual warp energy detected. Signs of recent passage, multiple life forms, human and other. Lucan signaled the legionnaires forward. Secure the perimeter. Watch for ambush. They moved deeper into the citadel, past murals depicting long-dead saints and shattered altars. The beacon's signal grew stronger, leading them toward a sealed vault at the heart of the fortress. Vera placed her hand on the ancient door, feeling the psychic residue of fear and desperation. Whatever called for help may still be inside, or it may be a trap. With a nod from Lucan and a prayer from Mirabelle, they forced the vault open. The darkness within seemed to breathe, alive with secrets and dangers yet unknown. The ancient vault door groaned open, releasing a gust of stale, cold air. Inside, the darkness was nearly absolute, broken only by the Legionnaires' helmet lamps and the flickering glow of the Sisters' relic torches. The walls were covered in faded inscriptions and the remnants of warding sigils, their power long since bled away. Vera led the way, bolt pistol drawn, senses straining for any sign of movement. The team advanced in tight formation, boots crunching on a floor littered with fragments of bone and shattered prayer icons. The pulse of the distress beacon was louder here, reverberating through the stone like a heartbeat. Muggos rose, auspex flickered with interference. Multiple life signs ahead, some human, others indeterminate. Warp contamination is severe. They rounded a corner and entered a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. At the center, a battered Vox unit emitted the beacon's signal, surrounded by a small group of ragged survivors. Imperial Guardsmen, their uniforms faded and torn, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. Lucan quickly signaled the Legionnaires to lower their weapons. "Identify yourselves." A sergeant stepped forward, his voice hoarse. "Sergeant Halden, 117th Vossian. We've been holding out for weeks. The cultists, they came from the lower levels. They took our wounded. We barricaded ourselves here, but something is hunting us in the dark." As the survivors spoke, a sister knelt by the Vox unit, her eyes widening. "This beacon, it's been modified. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies, including a warp-encoded channel." Vera's expression hardened. It's both a call for help and a lure. "The cult wants us here." Suddenly, a low, guttural chanting echoed from the corridors beyond. The temperature dropped, and the shadows seemed to thicken, coiling along the walls. Muggos Ro's voice was urgent. "They are coming. Prepare to defend the vault." The strike force formed a defensive ring around the survivors. As the chanting grew louder, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Cultists twisted by the warp, their eyes burning with unnatural light. And behind them, something far worse, its form shifting and indistinct. Vera raised her blade, her voice ringing through the chamber. "Hold the line. For the Emperor, let none pass." The battle for the vault had begun, and the fate of the last defenders and the secrets buried in the fortress hung in the balance. The vault's stone walls shook as the cultists hurled themselves at the defenders, their howls echoing through the ancient corridors. The Legionnaires fired disciplined volleys, bolt rounds tearing through the first wave of attackers. The Sisters of the Sacred Flame formed a living bulwark, their hymns rising above the chaos as they unleashed gouts of purifying fire. Sergeant Halden and his battered guardsmen fought with desperate courage, holding the line beside Lucan and the Legionnaires. Each cultist that fell seemed to dissolve into oily smoke, the warp's taint refusing to release its grip on the dead. From the shadows at the rear of the cultist horde, a monstrous figure emerged, part man, part shifting void. Its eyes blazed with unnatural hunger, and its voice was a guttural mockery of prayer. "You trespass on sacred ground. The gate will open, and all shall be unmade." Vera met its gaze, her will unyielding. "Your gate is closed. Your darkness ends here." Muggos Ro, working swiftly at the vault's ancient control panel, called out, "The beacon's warp channel is a key. They're trying to breach the lower sanctum." There's something sealed beneath us, something they want to awaken. The cult leader raised his arms, and the floor cracked, black mist seeping from below. The defenders braced themselves as the chamber trembled. Vera gave the order. "Hold them back. Ro, shut down the beacon now." With a surge of sparks and a burst of machine code prayer, Ro severed the warp channel. The cultists screamed as the connection was lost, their bodies writhing in agony. The monstrous leader lunged, but Lucan and the legionnaires met him head-on, blades and faith clashing against the warp's fury. In the chaos, Sister Mirabelle and her sisters formed a circle of flame, reciting the Emperor's benediction. The light pushed back the darkness, forcing the cultists to retreat. As the last of the attackers fell, the vault fell silent except for the labored breathing of the survivors. The floor, however, continued to pulse with a dark energy. Something deep below was stirring, its prison weakened but not yet broken. Vera turned to her battered team. "We've won the vault, but the true threat lies beneath. We go deeper, together." With weapons reloaded, prayers whispered, and resolve hardened, the strike force prepared to descend into the heart of the fortress. With a final secret waited in the dark, the battered survivors gathered at the gaping fissure in the vault's floor, where the black mist still curled and writhed. Vera led the way, her blade glowing with sanctified light as she descended the makeshift steps carved by the quake. Lucan followed, his legionnaires moving in disciplined silence, while the Sisters of the Sacred Flame formed a protective rearguard. Mugos Ro, his auspex humming with warning, mapped their descent with every cautious step. The air grew colder and heavier as they moved deeper, the stone walls slick with condensation and etched with ancient sigils, wards meant to hold something terrible at bay. The chanting from above faded, replaced by a low, thrumming pulse that seemed to vibrate in their bones. The bottom of the descent, they entered a vast, circular chamber. In its center stood a monolithic seal of black stone, covered in chains and surrounded by the remains of long-dead wardens. The seal pulsed with a sickly light, cracked spider-webbing across its surface. Mugos Ro's voice was tense. "This is the source. The cultists sought to break the seal. Something ancient is imprisoned here, and the warp beacon nearly finished the work." Suddenly, spectral forms rose from the shadows, echoes of the wardens, their faces twisted in eternal vigilance. One stepped forward, its voice a whisper in the gloom. "Do not break the seal. The darkness within cannot be destroyed, only contained. We gave our lives to bind it. Will you do the same?" Vera's resolve did not waver. "We will not falter. The Emperor's light endures, even here." As the team moved to reinforce the seal, the chamber shook violently. The cult's monstrous leader, wounded but not slain, crashed into the sanctum, his body now a vessel for the imprisoned entity's power. Warp energy crackled around him, and the chains on the seal strained and snapped. Lucan led the charge, clashing with the abomination as the sisters chanted prayers of binding, their voices ringing with defiance. Mugos Ro and the surviving guardsmen worked feverishly to reactivate the ancient wards, guided by the spectral wardens. Vera faced the cult leader, her blade meeting his claws in a storm of sparks and shadow. With a final cry, she drove her weapon through his heart, channeling the Emperor's will. The entity shrieked, torn from its host, and the seal blazed with blinding light as the ward snapped shut once more. The chamber fell silent. The seal held. The darkness was contained. Exhausted but victorious, the strike force climbed back toward the surface, the spectral wardens fading with a final blessing. The fortress was secure, its ancient evil bound anew, not by forgotten heroes, but by those who had come after, willing to pay the price. Above, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in centuries, casting light on the battered citadel and the survivors who had saved it. The ascent from the lower sanctum was slow and solemn. Each survivor bore the weight of what they had witnessed and endured, some limping, others supported by their comrades, all marked by the struggle against the darkness below. As they emerged into the ruined vault, The first rays of sunlight filtered through the shattered ceiling, illuminating the dust-filled air like a benediction. Outside, the battered citadel was quiet. The cultists who had not perished in the assault had fled into the wastelands, their power broken and their purpose lost. The guardsmen, now free from the siege, moved through the ruins, recovering the bodies of their fallen and tending to the wounded. The Sisters of the Sacred Flame formed a circle in the courtyard, singing a hymn of thanksgiving that echoed across the desolate plain. Vera stood at the highest point of the fortress, gazing out over the scarred landscape. Lucan joined her, his armor dented and scorched, his expression weary but resolute. "We held the line," he said quietly, "and we paid the price." Vera nodded. "The seal will hold. The Emperor's light endures because we endure." Mugos Row approached, presenting a data slate. "The ancient wards are stable. I have encoded the means to monitor and reinforce them should the need arise. This world is safe for now." Canoness Mirabelle led the survivors in a final prayer, honoring the dead and reaffirming their vows. The spectral wardens were gone, their duty fulfilled, but their sacrifice would not be forgotten as the ship prepared for departure. Vera sent a coded message to the nearest Imperial outpost, reporting the victory and requesting aid for the survivors. The fortress would be watched, its secrets guarded by those who understood the cost of vigilance. In the quiet that followed, Vera gathered her companions in the strategium. "We have closed another gate, but the war is not over. Darkness will rise again, somewhere, sometime. When it does, we will answer." The ship lifted from the surface, leaving the fortress bathed in the light of a new dawn. The survivors watched the world recede beneath them, each carrying the memory of what they had faced and the knowledge that, so long as they stood together, the shadows would never prevail. The stars beckoned, and with them, the unending call to serve.